So today we continue a sermon series on Psalm 139, and the last 2 weeks we've touched on some different themes that we find in this psalm. Words of affirmation about who God is and what this life is about. The first affirmation is that God knows us. We are known perfectly, completely by God. The second theme, as Anne so eloquently preached last Sunday, was that God is with us wherever we are, whether we're in the mountaintop of great joy or the valley of profound grief. God's with us wherever we are. Today, I want to focus on this theme. God formed us. God made us. Specifically, I want to look at verse 14. I praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. I want to look at three words: fearfully, wonderfully, and made. And I want to do it in light of the recent death of Kent Smith, a beloved former associate pastor here at Westside, who died suddenly a week from yesterday at the age of 73, and whose death has touched our heart as a congregation. And many people have shared their remembrances with me and with us, and some of those I will share in the sermon today. At the beginning, I must admit that I met Kent one time. His last Sunday was the Sunday before I got here, but I did happen to meet him during my final interview, and we spoke for a few minutes. But I feel like I've come to know him this week, perhaps more than ever. If Kent had not become an associate pastor, he would have become a biblical scholar. He loved to dive into the original language of the sacred text. And in this case, this psalm was originally written in Hebrew, which is why today I want to look at the Hebrew words in honor of Kent, because I think getting into the Hebrew helps us understand the significance of what it means that we are made by God. Now, I recognize that not everyone knew Kent. Maybe, in fact, most of you didn't know him. But I hope that you'll better understand how our ministry today continues to be shaped by his work. I also hope that if you do know him, you'll understand that the best way you can honor his legacy is to continue to do the things he taught you to do. And whether or not we knew Kent, the bigger point of this sermon is there is a mystery to each of you, to each of us. And we need to open to that and continue to allow God to form us and to make us and to shape our lives. So let's begin. The psalmist says, you and I are made. Now, we are taught, many of us in our culture today, that we are self-made. Self-made men and women. That is wrong. There is no such thing as a self-made man. There's no such thing as a self-made woman. The psalmist reminds us that each of us is God-made. God is our creator, and we are the creation. We are the created one. God is the potter, and we are the clay in the potter's hand. This is the big message of this psalm, that none of us are self-made. All of us are God-made, and we have been made for a reason and for a purpose that is crystal clear in Jesus, who says the whole point of our lives is to love as we are loved. Which leads to the second point here the psalmist makes, that you and I are fearfully made. Now, I got to be honest, I cringe every time I read that or I hear that, because that word fear can kind of take us off in a different direction. And I think Jesus is clear that fear is actually the opposite of faith. So what is the psalmist talking about today? Is he saying that we ought to be afraid? The Hebrew here helps us. The word yara is at the roots of this translation, and yara is better translated awe. Awe, which conjures up reverence, respect, honor. In Psalm 65, we see the same word, and it's translated like this: come and see what the Lord has done. He is awesome and his deeds among mortals. Think of how differently it sounds if we read today, you are awesomely made. Awesomely made. That is actually more faithful to the Hebrew here. You are an awesome piece of clay in an awesome potter's hand. You are an awesome creation in an awesome God's hand, which leads to the third point here, that the psalmist says you are wonderfully made. Now that sounds a little bit better. On the surface, it doesn't create that fight or flight response in us. But again, if you look at the Hebrew, there's more nuance and depth here. The word pala means to be remarkably different or striking, unique beyond human comprehension. The psalmist is saying something today that scientists are saying, that you and I are unique beyond human comprehension. Your fingerprint has never been seen before and will never be seen again. Your unique combination of DNA has never appeared on this planet, in this universe before, and will never appear again. So if you look in the mirror and think, I'm just average, I'm just an ordinary person, the psalmist says you're wrong. Look again. Look more closely. Look deeper. You are created in the image of God. You are a unique manifestation, a unique incarnation of God. You are a one of a kind. I praise you, for I am awesomely and uniquely made. If you listen closely, I think you can hear Kent say, Amen. That was the heart of what he wanted you to know. And he wanted you to know it because he had a difficult journey to come to that place for himself. I heard words like he was odd, he was weird, he was quirky, he did this Star Trek Energizer dance. He was different. He was uniquely different. And he was open about it. He had ADD, attention deficit disorder, and he spoke about it. He claimed his awesome uniqueness. He recognized that he didn't fit into a box and he didn't want to fit into a box. And that's why he had a particular heart for those of you who don't fit into the box. He wanted you to know that you were included in God's love. He wanted to invite you into the fold. He was a determined shepherd in terms of reaching the people who needed the church the most. He sought the outsider, the lost sheep, the ones on the margin, and gathered them in. And he challenged us all to join him in the work of radical inclusivity and hospitality. He called you out of your silos. He called you out of your tribes. He called you out of your comfort zones to welcome those who are different. And he believed that this community would be stronger if we became more diverse and if more people who were different than us felt welcomed here. And in many ways, Kent was an initial adopter of our vision to welcome and invite all people. And he was particularly passionate about including children and youth in that word all. And he didn't just want them in the fold. He wanted them involved in the mission and the ministry, even in leadership positions within the church. As Penny loves to remind us, the children and youth are not the future of the church. They are the present. They are the incarnational edge of what God is doing right here, right now, if we only pay attention to them and we let them continue to change our hearts. How much do we really welcome them? How much are we really inviting them into leadership, into the mission and ministry? How much are we really investing in our kids in this community of faith? Kent was talking with Kaylin Milazzo, who is a child of the church, who grew up as part of the youth program, ascended into leadership, was the person that Kent tapped to help Liz and to help others with the youth ministry after he left. And she went on to seminary and is now ordained as a Presbyterian minister. She had her laying on of hands at the ordination right here in this very space. Well, she was down in Montreat talking with Kent, and it was at the time when she was at seminary. And when she was at seminary, she was horrified that some of her peers at seminary saw children and youth ministry as a stepping stone to real ministry, aka senior pastor ministry. She was annoyed, scandalized by this. And she was full of righteous anger, and she said, "Kent, that's so insulting. That's not fair to the youth." And Kent had a twinkle in his eye, and he smiled. He said, "It's unbelievable, isn't it?" And then he let the moment breathe. And he said, it's really their loss, isn't it? It's really their loss. He was first and foremost a youth pastor. He didn't apologize. He was unabashedly all in for youth ministry, and he challenged you to love these youth and children, to raise them up, to give them responsibility and leadership. And my question is, are we doing that today? Are we really doing that? He believed that children and youth needed to be taught three things in particular, and these three things ought to sound familiar to all of us. He wanted children and youth to be in worship for the full hour. He presented research to leadership that said that children who continue to be worshiping adults are in worship for the entire hour. They learn the ritual. They recognize the importance of being with brothers and sisters of all ages of faith. They understood that's the only way for them to understand the importance of connecting with God and connecting with the community in a regular way. He advocated for that, he fought for that, and he had the scars to show that that's what he believed in. He also believed that education was important for kids and for people of all ages. And he wanted this church to commit to a full hour of education for all ages. He advocated for that, he fought for that, and he had the wounds and scars to show. Because he believed that when Jesus called us to be disciples, what Jesus really meant is what the word disciple means. Student. There's no graduation on the faith journey. We never arrive. We're always students. We're always like children if we're useful to God. And he understood that churches need to make a commitment to educate people of all ages and never stop. And the good news of this new schedule is we allow families to do that. We don't force them to do it. But families today can worship together, go to class together. They can go to class together and worship together. Kent would be proud of the decision that your session has made. He also called us to teach our children to be servants. If you went to camp with Kent, you could see a progression ahead of you of how you might rise in leadership. You saw that everybody begins as a camper, right? You begin at the bottom, for lack of a better word. But you also begin to see that if I earn the respect of the leadership, and as I find my voice and claim my power and my gifts, I can become a counselor in training. And then I can become a counselor. And then I can become a youth leader, an adult leader. If we really take this call seriously, Penny and the Family Life Committee should have a line of people ready to teach our children in Sunday school and to lead our youth in ministry. That's how we honor the legacy of Kent. By being passionate about the things that he was passionate, by inviting all people to connect, grow, and serve. You see, there's a danger in moments like this. And the danger is that we become nostalgic. Have you ever noticed that nostalgic people remember what they want to remember and forget what they want to forget? And their version of history is always cleaned up in such a way that there's no longer any responsibility on their shoulders. Are you with me? Nostalgic people are artfully skilled at never having to grow up because they can always look back and say, well, wasn't it better then? Well, what was better then was that you were being challenged to grow up and to mature and to step up in leadership and to invest your life for the betterment of others. After Kent's final evening at Henlope, and you had a big celebration of his ministry out on the camp, and the plan was that he was going to go to bed and he was going to wake up in the morning before anybody woke up, and he was going to ride off into the sunset. Last Henlope trip. A few of you thought it'd be a good idea to tie a bunch of cans to the rear bumper of Kent's car because you wanted him to make a big noise, wake everybody up, and have another party. But Kent was smarter than you. He got up early. He saw what was happening. He untethered those cans and let them fall quietly to the ground. And he rode off. Because he knew that ministry was not about him. It was about you. And he was leaving and entrusting that ministry into your hands, which is what he always did. And when he got into the pulpit to say his final words, what did he say? He said, "This church will be fine. Never forget, this isn't your church. It's Christ's church. And as long as Jesus is leading you, you'll be fine." Ministry for Kent was not about him. It was about you, and it was about Christ. Wise words from a wise pastor. On Wednesday, on my day off, I was walking the streets of Allendale, and one of you stopped your car, and before I knew who you were, you started approaching me, and I go, "Here it is, it's the end, I'm done." You pulled me over. I was walking in place, trying to give you the hint that, this isn't a great time to talk. And you reminded me that Kent loved heavy metal music. He was a fan of Metallica. I was a fan of Metallica. And I remembered a song. I actually put it on my iPod after that encounter. It was a song called "Nothing Else Matters." And as I heard those words, I just felt like they were important to share. So here they are. So close, no matter how far. Couldn't be much more from the heart. Forever trusting who we are. And nothing else matters. Never opened myself this way. Life is ours. We live it our way. All these words I don't just say, and nothing else matters. Trust I seek and I find in you. Every day for us, something new. Open mind for a different view, and nothing else matters. Never cared for what they do, never cared for what they know. But I know. Spoken by someone who began his journey as an atheist and who never gave up trying to reach those who didn't believe in God. Kent's time has come, and the ministry of Jesus Christ rolls on, and the question remains for us to answer. Will we invite all people? Will we welcome all people? Will we help all people, including our children and youth, connect, grow, and serve? And as we embark on this unknown destination trip, will we remember that we are awesomely and uniquely made, and you know what? Thank you, Kent, so are they. Fill in the blank. And will we take seriously Christ's central command to love as He loves? Because if we're honest, nothing else matters. Amen.